So I hope this is not going to be too boring compared to the previous one. I don't know, just to understand the people in the room, how many have had to do with Magento in the past or in the present? Okay. Some people, not too many. Okay, so this talk is about the challenges in growing and maintaining like Magento 2 store up to date. I am Renato, I'm head of engineering at End. If you don't know about End, we are basically a menswear retailer. We were awarded to be one of the fastest growing companies in Europe in 2017, 18 and 19. So we are doing some good work out there. And those are our the site. Oh, the laser doesn't work, but the site and the Instagram account. So we are, just to give a bit of a technical overview about the technology. We've been based on Magento since 2008, so one of probably the first people using it, and we replatformed to Magento 2 in 2017, probably one of the biggest stores, the Magento stores in the UK. So keeping up to date, who had to do with Magento will understand. We'll maybe be a bit nostalgic of when the only thing that was breaking when upgrading was the login or registration form because of the form key. Yeah, good times, they are over. So we talked about growth and keeping up to date, but I put keeping up to date first. Why? Because it is surviving. If you remember ProdSec bug 202198, it happened a few months ago. Basically, it was a SQL injection vulnerability. It was exploitable by all user. You didn't need to be logged in the admin or something like that. Every user could exploit that. What it did was allowing to query, so get data, update data, delete data, so your competitor could hide behind some networks and delete all your data. And you're like, okay, fair enough now. There was a public POC available since the patch day. So it wasn't a 0 date, but almost. And it affected all the available supported version of Magento 2 outside. They released a patch for 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, because all of them were affected by this. This is a stat of the hacked Magento 2 stores per month. It doubled in April and compared to the previous months, and then it doubled again in March. And June is an estimate, but apparently it's going to go up a lot because not many people patch. So good for the hackers. So the same article I was quoting before states that we had basically 16 hours to patch Magento 2. So keeping up to date is important, but it's also important to be very fast at doing that. And how fast you can be depends on the specific release, so circumstances, but also if you are clever and you set up your work in a certain way, it's going to be easier. So what could go wrong in upgrading? Magento 2 is evolving a lot faster than Magento 1. There weren't many features going on, and so now it has a lot of traction, which is good for the product, but it's also bad for who's using it because a lot of new bugs every release and a lot of new things to understand. So I'm going to go very fast here because not many people know how to use Magento here. But so on the back end, some interfaces can change. Internal methods, you might be overriding something and they can change, and also the logic. So the methods could be the same, but some class upstream might be using different kind of method in a different level. So it basically changed the way it's it's working, and you're basically left at understanding that without seeing any error. You just say it doesn't work. It skips your customization. On the front end, usual stuff. So there might be changes in HTML or layout files, but also we now have JS. Okay, we had them before as well, but now there are a lot more. Or HTML and JS file. HTML, all the templating in Knockout, it's crazy, it's insane. So you can really, something can change and affect other 10 or 20 files. It's so like patched together in a weird way. So how can you be prepared? Level 0, what everyone says. So override as little things file as possible, and that's obviously worth for everything. So the less you touch, the less you're going to break on an upgrade. If you use API interface and classes, you're going to be safer. Not totally safe, but safer. And this usually requires a bit more work, but if you set the composer dependencies right, it's going to help you when you upgrade. So when you use APIs, interface, and classes, you are safer, and you can put like wider constraints. But if you are actually using non-API interfaces and you're like extending or overriding like protected methods, rewriting private methods, you want to be as tight as possible. So when they release a new version, and a new one came out yesterday, basically you cannot go in, there are hundreds of modules in Magento. You cannot go in one by one and say, okay, this changed, but not too much, so I don't need to check that, and so on. But if you set the dependencies right, when you actually develop your internal extensions, you will be notified automatically by Composer. You do a Composer update and it tells you, oh, this breaks here, it's not compatible, so you can go and check what changed, and maybe even test specifically that area instead of testing everything. Level 1 is always be on a major minor version that is supported. That part is missing. So when a patch comes out, you don't want to like be upgrading also of a major version, just a minor version potentially. So just to recap how Semver works. So you have the version that came out yesterday is 2.3.2. So 2 is the major version, minor is 3, and patch is 2. So compared to the previous one, we've just bumped up of a patch. So to recap, if you're on 2.2 or 2.3, you're fine for a while. If you're on 2.1, you should be planning an upgrade. And if you're on 2.0, well, you're basically, you have bigger problems than the security patches. So the versioning also can mislead you. There were some transitions that weren't that minor as they would have appeared to be, like 2.3.0 to 2.3.1 was a big one in terms of features. 2.2.5 to 2.2.6 broke a lot of things, and there are others in the list. So apparently, it looks like, from how Magento is treating, an Adobe company is treating that now, it's more like the version of Magento is has a business meaning. So again, if you use Composer versions to set the dependencies, it's going to be safer because the Composer versions actually depend on what changed. So patch, nothing particular, just fix a bug. Minor can have some like minor changes, and major can break backward compatibilities also on API methods. Level 2 on how to be prepared is automated testing. Of course, automating testing is more work, but it increases velocity, not only in upgrading, but also when you're adding new stuff, and this goes without saying. It also makes a complete regression test possible. So if you have, I don't say like the average or the simple Magento 2 stores, but if you have a slightly customized one, you're actually going to have more tests than it's humanly possible to do. Like, okay, you're a guest user and you log into the authentication pop-up, or you log in through the authentication screen, or you log in through the checkout. There are so many. It's actually impossible for a QA engineer or for a QA lead to sign off a full test unless he has 10 people and a couple of weeks to do them. So definitely, like, automated testing is a need. What you can do is use unit testing. They are easier to develop, but of course they don't cover full functionalities. They just cover a portion of the portions of individual functions. So it's called unit for a reason. The best option is probably doing functional testing, and Magento now ships with MFTF, Magento Functional Testing Framework. It's more complex, it's heavier, but it covers like functionalities, so not only backend but also frontend. And when you test login with that, you know that you can actually do a login with a browser. So part 2, growing and adding new functionalities. Magento is a lot more complex than Magento 1. Fun depends on the point of view. If you're not working with it and you see other people working, flipping tables, yes, it is fun, if you're a bit sadistic. So how long will it take to do this? Or how long will it take to do that? The safest answer is suggestions. Flip a coin. So I have like a couple of funny examples. So let's say we have a request. It's not that uncommon. So I want to add a custom column to the order address table. Maybe if you had a Magento extension, you had to do that as well, like add a custom column, maybe to save some details about the request. And then I want to add this new field to the checkout, and then I want to actually save the value. So if someone put in a value there, I want to save it to that column that we did just above. I'm just explaining that because it seems to be obvious, but so the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is, okay, let's add the column to the order address table. You can create the module if it's not a new module. You can just use the upgrade schema, and you can add and test manually, in this case, the data definition language for the column. Here, like, let's take an estimate with like a mid-level person. How would you guess this part in hours? Couple hours? 4? Yeah, between 2 and 4. I was good with this, like, because it's the best. The only grace you're going to have here. The amazing is actually that with Magento 2.3.0 or newer, you have the collaborative schema. So you just need to add this file to your module, and it's like a few lines, and then run setup upgrade. And this is actually going to add the custom column to the order address table, and that's it. And this is probably like 1 hour, like super easy. The bad. So the bad is second point. Add this new field to the checkout. Should be easy, right? It's just some HTML that you need to put there, after all. So you have to override the layout XML to add the field to the shipping address. Okay, fine. I mean, I can take it. But then, for the billing address, you have to write a plugin for layout processor. So basically, you can edit there as well. And then you can go and edit this super deep multi-level associative array with many properties that you have probably to var dump, debug, and copy and paste from some other some other field. Let's say if it's a text, you copy from another text. If it's a select, you copy from another select. This part, how long? 4 days? Yeah, it depends, because sometimes it depends. I put 4 hours for something. Like, I don't know, it depends on, probably it's the good, like, if you did it before, it's gonna be 4 hours. If you have to do it from scratch, it's gonna be 4 days because you're going to Google everything. So the ugly is the last part. So you want to save that data that you collected now. Steps. Should have done it in parts, more suspense. So first of all, you add the property as an extension attribute. That's super easy, right? Like an XML file. And then, because you cannot just add it to the payload, otherwise the overposting is not allowed, so the encoder is going to refuse it. Then you have to handle the submission on the front-end side. So first of all, you bang your head on like how to configure the data scope, because it's not going to be an address attribute, it's going to be an address customer attribute. So you have to put it down there, otherwise you don't find it afterward. And then somewhere it's called a customer attribute, and then you have to update it to an extension attribute. So you need to add a mixin to save the shipping address. And then also the billing address is saved on placeholder, so you have to do a mixin for that as well. If you are a guest user, the API path is completely different. So let's say you are saving, okay, you have 2 APIs. Okay, you can understand that. It's totally like reasonable. You have an API to save the shipping address and another one to save the billing address. But then, so here you're doing the tests as a logged in user because it's easier. You don't have to put in your address every time. Then you say, okay, let's test the guest scenario. So you already did 2 patches to like save the data on those 2. You already wasted a lot of time. And now you say, okay, let's do a guest test, or maybe it's the QA test and not even you. And then you realize it doesn't work. And when you look at the APIs, you see that basically the guest APIs are totally separate and they're totally different, and they don't even go through the same like flow. So you had to do other 2 patches. And then it's not over. So this part says the ugly, and then the ugly is with a strike through, and instead it says the nightmare. Because at this point, it becomes a nightmare, right? You're not over yet. Okay, yeah, because we just talked about the front end, right? Now there's the back end. So you have to write a plugin to handle the storage for the shipping address. Actually, it's what I just said. The shipping address, the billing address, and then guest for billing and shipping. Oh, wait. No, look at it. So estimate for this?
4 days. 1 day.
1 day. Whoa, with a time machine. You saw the number. I put 24 hours, so it's 3 days, or like a lot of Red Bull if you do it in 1 row. So a lot of time. And you can imagine, it's like I work for an in-house company, and for us, it's like we are also like quite easy on timelines. So if we have to deliver a thing and we want to do it well, they allow us to like take a week more, a month more. 2 months, maybe not.
So does every job get like a contingency?
We don't do timing at all. So it's like, do it when you finish, and you get another task. So we have more or less, oh, we are hiring, by the way. We have a kind of, how do you call it, like a feature schedule timeline. But it's never going to be respected, because you have like someone on holiday and okay, okay, this is pushed over for a week, and then someone else is online. So it's just more or less a priority list rather than a timeline. So in our case, it's not a problem because we just report and we say it took more because of this reason and because of that reason, and of course it involved the word Magento is babe. Can you take it away? And so that, but I guess like working in an agency like some other people do and having to justify this to a client must be a nightmare because, you know, it looks like you're taking a piss. Like, oh, this thing that took 1 day and then you're like taking 2 weeks to add a field and save the value. Like in the good old days, it took like, I don't know, a few hours to implement it with any framework. So example 2 is like add a custom database entity and create the admin CRUD. So create, update, delete, and expose all the resources via API. So the boring part is add a custom database entity. So with the steps, so you add the setup schema and you create model interface. Oh wait, yeah, the model interface, then the model, then the resource model, then the collection. Okay, and that's one. Now you can read and save data at this point, but because it's best practice, then you also implement the repository interface and also the repository itself. And this is how long?
Sorry, I didn't even get past the boring bit. Sorry.
Well, create
3 hours, 4 hours.
What did I say? 8 hours? Well, depends on the logic you have in the repository. So if you want to implement the search bit, it's going to be even more than 8 hours. But it's somewhere between 4 and 8 because the repository can have like complex logic, definitely. If you want to test it at this point, yeah. If you just write the code and you don't test it, 4 hours definitely. So even more boring. You create like the admin part. So what you do is like you create the grid controller, then you create the grid, the UI component for the grid and the layout. Then you do all the mass actions at this point, since you're there, and then you create the form, the controller for the form, the layout and UI component. So boring. And you implement. All this is just editing, copy and paste XML and editing, and then copy and paste like the code for the controller, and then just edit the messages. Oh, we couldn't save this store, or like oh, I need to remove this and call it like something else because now the entity has a different name. So you're basically copying and pasting like 100 lines of codes and just changing a few lines. That you're always going to forget something, and at some point you're going to find a message that was there from 3 projects ago because you copied from that and then from that and then from that, and you're going to find it there. I don't know, this ant it does not exist. Wait, it was 5 years ago that I worked on that project. Ended up here somehow. And okay, and then you implement all the create, edit, and save controllers. All this part, how long can it be? Well, actually it depends, but I put it there like 16 hours, because you have the validations and everything. This is if you're lucky, because with the UI components, you put together everything with XML. So if a component doesn't exist already, like if it's something complex, you have to develop it, and it can take days or weeks. When you have to do something, you have to do the JavaScript, and then you have to do the HTML for it, and so on. The super easy at this point is just take it to the API and expose resource or resources like the usual get, update, get, post, put, and delete. Steps, you just map every API resource to a repository function, and then that's just changing a file that is called web API. And this is probably 1 hour, so this has gone well, actually. And so the question is, I put it there. How does it compare with other framework? Well, it depends because, like for instance, with Laravel, you can say I need to add a migration. It's like 1 hour. It's super easy. You don't need to do repository model and so on. So it's just that. But then when you have to do the create, update, delete interface, it's like, okay, you have to put in Bootstrap and develop your own stuff. Still, it might take less than Magento, so 12 hours. Then it depends because the Magento grid already have filtering and so on. And to finish, the API resource is probably going to take you 6 hours because you have to do again like mapping and save the model, validate, put some authentication on top of it. So in the end, it's not that bad. It's about the same. And point is that when you're using a lot of functions that the framework put there for you, it's probably worth it, like compared to other things, especially the ACL part, when you create like a customer and that customer has only access to his own stuff, or when you create an admin user and you can select the resources that a user can access, and then reflects also on the API's permissions. That saves you a lot of time, but really a lot of time. So, and we're coming to the end now. Conclusions. Vulnerabilities will always come up in a platform that is so popular and also so complex. So you have to be ready to upgrade and as quickly as possible. So take the steps that are needed. Estimates for features can be really difficult. Never take anything for granted, but I guess that everyone that worked on Magento to at least one time, we already know that. If you think this will be easy, first check the code. It's not going to be easy. And just to add on the one above, estimates for bug fixing are impossible because you might find a problem that then leads to another problem, and then when you fix, you break 10 other things. So it's something that just crumbles down the whole things. Is breaking at the end of it. Maybe I'm just being pessimistic, am I? Anyone else can?
Yes, you are.
Okay, I'm just pessimistic. And yeah, but on the good side, we can say that when you're leveraging like the API framework or the admin side of it, and not doing something that is too out of the box, even on 2.3, the GraphQL is super nice. The GraphQL integration. If you're using those kind of functionalities, it's going to help you a lot and save you a lot of time, even compared to Magento 1 or to other lower level frameworks. And that's it. If you have any question.
I'm trying to figure out, so, you know, it seems like a lot of companies use Magento to build content and pages like banners and landing pages.
Okay.
And I know a lot of teams get their developers and engineering teams to work on these tasks.
Yeah.
But it seems like there's already a lot of urgent, more pressing tasks to focus on.
Well, yeah.
How do you balance that? I mean, do you find that your developers in-house build content and it's another team?
Not really. So we've basically so the website is moving very fast. So for us, it's important to be able to update every day, and we cannot rely on developers to do that because maybe someone is on holidays, someone is here. So we got rid of that as soon as possible. What we did was like define the kind of content that the content team needed, and we were like, okay, you might have like a single banner or like 2 banners, one next to the other, or you can have a product carousels. We defined like 10 of them, and we built a page on the admin where they can go and configure them, and then they can drop them in to the CMS page, and basically they are totally autonomous doing that. And also they have to update the image, they see the image, the resolution are checked, so there is almost no room for make a mistake. Of course they always do, but
Do you use widgets?
no, we don't. We just include these custom blocks. they're really they extend the template class. So
developers still work on it to an extent.
yeah, we basically work everything on like more customer experience kind of things. Plus, well, so it's like add something to the checkout, like add a payment method or like improve the speed of or improve the filters and so on. In fact, like recently we've been rewriting the PLP, the product listing page and the product page in React, so it's super smooth. It's basically a single page application that you don't notice because the URL changes, but and it's a lot faster than before. We use the APIs and everything for that. Something that is interesting for that is Page Builder. The 2.3.1 or 2, I don't know, 1. So it's already out.
No, it came out in, so we've just had 2.3.1.
Yeah, the previous one. In fact, there were a few questions at Imagine because they, I think they put it on the enterprise, but they also put it on sale on marketplace, which okay, it's better than nothing because no.
It's not yet.
Okay, it's
I
not
don't
yet.
think it's for
Okay.
sale. I don't think it's going to be an open source.
Enterprise, Magento enterprise customers.
It's commerce, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not available yet on open source, but they're kind of saying it is coming, but how responsive it is, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm very skeptical of those kind of tools. Like, it's the I prefer the way, like for instance, Vue Storefront does it. So you can basically pull in data from a headless WordPress instance or from like headless content management system like Prismic, for instance. Prismic.io, you can just say, okay, I want the homepage from that and the contact page from that, and you just build the content from outside. I think it's more robust, and especially like Prismic work with objects. So on the front end side, you receive an object and you render it as you want. So it's more or less the same thing that we did for the content team, because they cannot screw around. They can just put in here an image. You want this component, you have to put an image here. You want this component, you have to select 6 products. So you don't have a room for making mistakes. And it's all like handled on their side. You don't have to think about uptime and updating vulnerabilities and stuff. It's like you just pay the monthly fee, and which is the same for the Magento license. It's a yearly fee, but no problem. Any other question?
Cool. Thank you.